There is a vegetable sitting in your refrigerator right now, or on your kitchen counter, that most Americans over 60 eat several times a week. It's been called a superfood. It shows up on every healthy eating list. Doctors recommend it. Nutritionists celebrate it. And yet, for a very specific group of people, eating it regularly may be quietly accelerating one of the most devastating processes the aging brain can experience. I know that sounds alarming. It should, because in my years working with patients over 60, I have seen this pattern unfold in ways that are completely preventable, and almost nobody is talking about it. This isn't about fear. This is about information that should have reached you years ago and didn't. What I'm going to share today is one of the most important things I can offer any patient over 60, so stay with me. Because what's happening inside the brain of someone who has been eating this vegetable in excess is something the research is only now beginning to clarify, and the implications are serious. Let me start by explaining exactly what we mean when we talk about this vegetable and why it creates a problem specifically for the aging brain. We're talking about spinach, kale, Swiss chard, beet greens, the family of leafy greens that are universally praised as health foods. And here's the thing. For most people, in moderate amounts, they are genuinely nutritious. That part is true. But here's what nobody is telling patients over 60, and it matters enormously. These vegetables, particularly when consumed in large daily quantities, as many health-conscious seniors now do, are among the highest dietary sources of oxalates. And in an aging brain, oxalate accumulation is emerging as a serious concern that the mainstream medical conversation has almost entirely ignored. Oxalates are naturally occurring compounds found in many plants. The body processes them through the kidneys, and in younger, healthy individuals, this happens efficiently. But after 60, kidney filtration slows. Oxalate clearance becomes less efficient. And here's what the research is increasingly showing. Oxalates don't just stay in the kidneys. They accumulate in tissues throughout the body, including the brain. Studies have identified oxalate crystal deposits in brain tissue. And when those crystals form near blood vessels in the brain, they trigger a localized inflammatory response. And inflammation in brain tissue, what researchers call neuroinflammation, is one of the most destructive forces the aging brain faces. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not telling you to throw away your leafy greens forever. That is not the point. The point is that for people over 60 who have been blending large daily smoothies with spinach or eating kale salads every single day under the belief that more is always better, the accumulation over years may be contributing to something far more serious than anyone warned them about. And when I tell you what that something is, I want you to really pay attention, because chances are you've already noticed it. Have you walked into a room recently and stood there completely blank, unable to remember why you went in? Have you reached for someone's name, someone you've known for years, and felt it slip away just before you could say it? Have you reread the same paragraph 2 or 3 times and still felt like you weren't absorbing it? Have you been in a conversation and suddenly lost the thread, like the channel changed without warning? If any of this sounds familiar, I want you to know something important. This is not just aging. This is not something you have to accept. And it is not your fault. Your brain is struggling with something real. And the fact that your doctor looked you in the eye and said, "It's normal for your age," is one of the most damaging things that could have happened to you. Because what is actually happening inside your brain right now is far more specific and far more addressable than that dismissal suggests. In my years of clinical work with patients over 60, I have watched this particular pattern play out hundreds of times. Someone comes in, sharp person, accomplished, aware enough of their own mental function to know that something has shifted. They tell me they feel like they're thinking through fog. They tell me names and dates are slipping. They tell me they're hiding it from their kids, from their spouse, because they're terrified of what it means. And what breaks my heart every time is that they come in already grieving, already mourning the version of themselves they fear is disappearing. And the worst part, the thing that makes me genuinely angry at the system, is that they've already been told it's normal, already been patted on the head and sent home. Nobody looked for the mechanism. Nobody asked what was actually driving the decline. Because here's what I've seen in the research and in practice. The brain doesn't just decline randomly. When cognitive function starts slipping before someone reaches advanced old age, when a 63-year-old or a 68-year-old starts noticing real changes, there is always a mechanism driving it, always a specific biological process that has gone wrong. wrong, and in the majority of cases I've worked with, that mechanism involves three converging forces happening simultaneously in the brain, and what's remarkable is that all three of them can be addressed. But first, I need you to understand what's actually happening, because once you see it clearly, everything changes. Think of your brain as a city with hundreds of millions of roads connecting every neighborhood, every building, every house to every other. Memory works when those roads are clear, well-maintained, and signals can travel at full speed. Now imagine a slow-moving storm. Not dramatic, not loud, just a persistent, low-grade weather event that quietly damages the roads. Not all at once, not catastrophically. Just a little damage here, a little obstruction there, day after day, year after year. Eventually, signals that used to travel in milliseconds start taking detours. Some connections slow down, some stop working entirely. That is precisely what chronic neuroinflammation does to the brain, and it is the first and most powerful force driving the kind of cognitive changes that patients over 60 describe to me every week. The second force is oxidative stress, the accumulation of cellular damage in neurons over decades of living. Every cell in your brain produces energy through a process that generates waste byproducts called free radicals. In youth, the brain's antioxidant systems manage this efficiently, but after 60, those systems weaken. Free radical damage accumulates in the membranes of neurons, in the mitochondria that power them, in the delicate structures that allow one neuron to communicate with the next. Think of it like rust forming on those roads, invisible at first, then progressively degrading the infrastructure. And this process accelerates when inflammation is already present, which is why these two forces together are so much more destructive than either one alone. The third force is one that almost nobody talks about in a routine medical appointment, and it is arguably the most immediately reversible. Neurotransmitter deficit, specifically the decline of acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter that your brain depends on for memory encoding and retrieval, for focus, for learning. Acetylcholine production declines naturally with age, but it declines far faster when the brain is inflamed, when oxidative damage is accumulating, and when certain dietary and lifestyle factors are pushing the system in the wrong direction. And here's what makes this so urgent. Many of the most commonly prescribed medications in people over 60 actively block acetylcholine. Antihistamines like Benadryl, sleep aids like Unisom, bladder medications like Detrol, certain antidepressants. These are called anticholinergic drugs, and their connection to accelerated cognitive decline is one of the most documented and most ignored relationships in pharmacology. If you are over 60 and taking any of these regularly, this is one of the most important things I can share with you today. If what I'm sharing today is new to you, and I suspect it is, make sure you subscribe to this channel. I release critical health information for people over 60 every week. Information your doctor may not have time to share in a routine appointment. Hit the subscribe button below. It costs nothing, and it could be one of the most important health decisions you make today. Now let me bring this back to the vegetable we started with, because this is where the connection becomes clear. The oxalates found in high concentrations in spinach, kale, and beet greens don't just cause kidney stones in susceptible individuals. What the research is beginning to show is that oxalate-driven inflammation in neural tissue may be an underappreciated contributor to the kind of chronic, low-grade neuroinflammation I just described. And in someone who is already dealing with nutrient deficiencies, particularly B12, vitamin D, and DHA, who is already experiencing neurotransmitter decline, who is already under the burden of accumulated oxidative stress, adding daily large doses of oxalate-rich foods to that picture is, at minimum, something that deserves serious consideration, not elimination. Awareness, context, moderation. The same vegetable that is genuinely anti-inflammatory in moderate amounts can become pro-inflammatory in excess in a body that lacks the metabolic capacity to process it efficiently. And the aging body, by definition, has less of that capacity than it did 30 years ago. Researchers at the Rush University Medical Center in Chicago have published findings showing that dietary patterns significantly influence the rate of cognitive decline in aging populations. What their work found, and this is the piece the medical community has been slow to act on, is that specific nutrient deficiencies, combined with dietary inflammatory load, can accelerate cognitive aging by years, not months. These aren't fringe findings. They've been replicated. and they point to a conclusion that is simultaneously frustrating and empowering. A significant portion of the cognitive decline that millions of Americans over 60 are experiencing right now is not inevitable. It is driven, and what drives it can be addressed. I had a patient, I'll call her Margaret, 71 years old when she first came to see me. She had been living with what she described as brain fog for about 4 years. Sharp woman, retired teacher. She told me she had started keeping a notepad by the door because she kept forgetting her own errands. She told me her daughter had started calling more frequently, with a tone of voice that Margaret recognized immediately. The checking in tone, the "are you okay" tone, the tone that told her that her daughter was watching for signs. Margaret was devastated by that. Not by the forgetting itself, by what the forgetting was doing to her family. She had been to her primary care doctor twice. Both times she was told her cognitive test scores were within normal range for her age. She left both appointments feeling worse than when she walked in, because normal wasn't good enough. Normal wasn't who she had been. We ran a comprehensive panel. Her B12 levels were at the very bottom of the reference range. Her vitamin D was severely deficient. Her DHA levels were low, and she had been drinking a large spinach and kale smoothie every single morning for 3 years, genuinely believing she was protecting her brain. Within 6 months of addressing these deficiencies, with targeted nutritional support and a modest reduction in her oxalate load, she told me the fog had lifted. She told me she had been to her granddaughter's birthday party and remembered every name in the room. Margaret's story is not unusual. What is unusual is that she found the answer, because the truth is that most people in her situation never do. They accept the fog as aging. They shrink their social world to accommodate it. They stop raising their hands in conversations because they're afraid of losing the thread. They start avoiding new situations, new technology, new places, new people, because the mental effort required has become exhausting in a way it never was before. They grieve quietly, and nobody tells them that the grieving isn't necessary. This is not just about memory. This is about identity. This is about the version of yourself that you have been your entire adult life. Sharp, capable, engaged, present. And when that version starts slipping, the loss goes far deeper than forgetting where you put your keys. It reaches into your sense of who you are, your relationships, your sense of purpose, your ability to be fully present with the people you love most. I have sat with patients who were in silent anguish, not because they had received a diagnosis, but because they lived every day in the uncertainty of waiting for one, not knowing if the forgetting was normal or the beginning of something irreversible. That uncertainty is its own form of suffering, and it is completely unnecessary for millions of people who are experiencing treatable, addressable cognitive changes. The link in the description below takes you directly to the natural cognitive support formula I recommend to my patients. It combines everything I've covered today in the specific forms that actually reach brain tissue. Take a look when you have a moment. I think it will make a lot of sense after what you just learned. Let me tell you about the specific natural compounds that the research consistently supports for the kind of neurological challenges we've been discussing. The first is Bacopa monnieri, an herb that has been used in traditional medicine for thousands of years and is now among the most rigorously studied natural compounds for cognitive support. What makes Bacopa scientifically interesting is that it works on multiple pathways simultaneously. Multiple randomized controlled trials support its role in memory and cognitive function. Its primary mechanisms include the inhibition of acetylcholinesterase, which means it slows the breakdown of acetylcholine, and a well-documented anti-inflammatory effect on neural tissue. In practical terms, what I've observed clinically is that patients who support their acetylcholine levels notice the most immediate improvements in word retrieval and short-term memory, the two things that create the most day-to-day distress. The second compound is lion's mane mushroom, Hericium erinaceus, and I want to spend a moment on this one because the research on it is genuinely remarkable. Lion's mane is currently the only natural compound identified that stimulates the production of nerve growth factor, NGF. NGF is the protein your brain needs to maintain, repair, and in some cases regenerate neurons. Published research demonstrates its ability to stimulate NGF synthesis in neuronal cells. Most people have never heard of NGF, but in the neuroscience community, it has generated extraordinary interest because it represents the brain's own capacity to maintain itself. When NGF levels are supported, the brain retains more of what researchers call neuroplasticity, the ability to form new connections, systems to adapt, to compensate for damage. This is not a fringe idea. This is among the most exciting areas of current cognitive research. Phosphatidylserine is the third compound I consistently recommend, and it is one of the few natural substances with an FDA-qualified health claim for cognitive function support. Phosphatidylserine is a phospholipid. It makes up a significant portion of the cell membrane of every neuron in the brain. As we age, levels decline, and with them, the efficiency of cellular communication. The membrane of a neuron is not just a container. It is an active participant in how signals are sent and received. When membrane integrity is compromised, neurotransmitter receptors function less efficiently, and the speed and accuracy of neural communication slows. Supporting phosphatidylserine levels is, in effect, supporting the physical infrastructure that memory depends on. Omega-3 DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, is foundational, and I want to be direct about why. Your brain is 60% fat. The most abundant fat in brain tissue is DHA. And extensive research consistently shows that most Americans over 60 are significantly deficient in it. When DHA levels fall, the structural integrity of neuron membranes is compromised in a way that directly affects cognitive function. Think of DHA as the brain's primary building material. Running the brain with low DHA is like trying to maintain a building with the wrong grade of concrete. The structure still stands, but it becomes progressively less stable. Combined with methylcobalamin, the active form of vitamin B12, which is essential for maintaining the myelin sheath that insulates neurons and allows signals to travel at full speed, these compounds address the nutritional foundation that the aging brain depends on and is most frequently deprived of. The connection between B12 deficiency and cognitive decline is one of the most documented relationships in medicine. Up to 40% of adults over 60 have meaningful B12 deficiency. And because the decline is slow and invisible, it goes undetected for years while the damage accumulates. Now, finding each of these compounds separately, in the right forms, the right doses, and the right combinations, is genuinely difficult. Most people over 60 don't have the time, the access, or the background knowledge to put this together on their own. That's why I've left a link in the description to a formula that brings all of this together. I've reviewed it carefully, and it is one of the few options I feel comfortable recommending to my patients. I want to address something directly because it comes up with almost every patient I have this conversation with. Why didn't my doctor tell me this? It is a fair and important question, and the answer is not a conspiracy. It is a system problem. The conventional medical system is designed around diagnosis and treatment, not prevention and optimization. A physician in a 10-minute appointment is looking for a disease. They are not, in most cases, looking for the gap between optimal function and clinical disease, which is exactly where most people over 60 who are struggling with cognitive changes actually live. Additionally, medical education provides very little training in nutritional science or in the emerging research on natural compounds. Doctors are not withholding information maliciously. They simply were not trained in this area. And the result, across millions of patients, is that people are told their decline is normal, sent home without answers, and left to watch it worsen. That is the system failing. And the cost of that failure is paid by real people whose quality of life is diminished unnecessarily. You are not powerless here. That is the single most important thing I can leave you with today. Your brain retains a remarkable capacity for adaptation and response, what neuroscientists call neuroplasticity. The research on this has shifted dramatically over the last 2 decades. We now know that the brain is not a fixed, declining organ. It is a dynamic, responsive system that reacts to what you give it. When inflammation is reduced, when oxidative damage is mitigated, when neurotransmitter precursors are supported, when the structural nutrients that neurons depend on are restored to adequate levels, the brain responds, not instantly, not dramatically, but measurably, consistently, in ways that patients notice in their daily lives. Clarity returns in conversations. Words come back more easily. The fog lifts, not all at once, but steadily, like a morning that slowly comes into focus. And the next time you reach for that bag of spinach, or whatever health food you've been consuming daily under the belief that more is always better, I want you to remember what I shared today, because now you understand the context. You understand that the same food that benefits one person in one situation can work against another person in a different biological context. You have information now that most people your age will never receive. Use it. And remember, you are not at the mercy of what is happening in your brain. You understand the mechanism. And understanding the mechanism is where every meaningful change begins. If today's video opened your eyes to something important, share it with someone you care about. Because there are millions of people over 60 dealing with this silently, and they don't have to. The link in the description goes directly to the natural formula I recommend. Take a look when you have a quiet moment. Subscribe for more critical health information every week, and leave a comment below. What was the most surprising thing you learned today? I read every single one.